We're all human. And it's important to know that doctors are people too. Doctors have emotions, they have passions in life and hobbies, and they enjoy participating as active members in the communities where they practice medicine. Doctors have families, friends, and relationships. While the latest in healthcare and the most current treatments for ailments will be topics on this Doctors Are People Too radio TV show, the focus will be in learning more about the interesting aspects in a physician's life and what they do away from the doctor's office or operating room table.
Hello, South Florida and beyond, and globally on the iHeartRadio app. Welcome to Doctors Are People Too. I'm really excited today. We have Dr. Neil Galindez in the studio, and I'm so happy he took the time to come over here today. I know he's very busy. When you have a cardiothoracic surgeon on your radio show, glad to see them in the seat because they're busy all day long. And I knew he would be here, so I'm glad to have him. Dr. Galindez, how are you doing today?
I'm doing very well, David.
Thank you. Thank you for making the trip, too. It's great to hear. Let's get right into it. Let's not waste any time. I have a lot of questions for you today. Cardiothoracic surgery is something I want to learn more about. It's something, you hear a little bit about in the news, and it's a physician that you're referred to, but I don't think the common person knows too much about cardiothoracic surgery. So let's get right into it. It's correct to assume you're a surgeon who treats conditions of the hearts and lungs when we say cardiothoracic?
That's correct, David. A cardiothoracic surgeon is a specialist with extensive training in surgery and specifically surgery of the heart, lungs, and all the organs and tissues related to the thorax. So that's where the word comes from, cardiothoracic.
Oh, okay. I've never heard that. So the thorax. So it's obviously a Latin term that ties it all in there.
Well, it has to do with the chest cavity and its contents, including the chest wall as well.
Okay, and you specialize in the heart and lungs as well?
That's correct.
Okay, great. We've heard a lot about in the news in the last few years atrial fibrillation, or the shorter term of AFib, and it's something like I think I first heard on a TV commercial, and I may have laughed because I have atrial fibrillation or something, and I didn't really get it, understand it. But this is a serious condition. It's really no joke anymore. I've heard patients talk about it as maybe feeling like a bird strapped in their chest, or something out of rhythm, and they kind of lose their breath. What is atrial fibrillation, and why is a cardiothoracic surgeon involved in treating it?
Well, let me explain to you real quick about atrial fibrillation, and you need to understand a little bit of anatomy of the heart. The heart has 4 chambers, 2 upper chambers and 2 bottom chambers. The upper chambers are the atrium, okay? And the lower chambers are the ventricles. When the heart contracts, is because there's electrical impulses that are natural to the heart, intrinsic to the heart, and they have to go a very specific pathway for this to happen in a coordinated manner. Atrial fibrillation happens because there's some change in the tissue of the atrium, the upper chambers of the heart, that then develops some abnormal electrical impulses and activity where in places where it doesn't supposed to be. So when this happens, the muscle starts contracting in a very uncoordinated way, and as you might think, it's going to be when there's no coordination between the upper chamber of the heart and the lower chamber of the heart, then there's going to be problems in how that blood goes from one part of the heart to the next. By doing this, and if you can imagine the heart contracting, every time it contracts, blood goes from the upper chambers to the bottom chambers. When the upper chambers are in atrial fibrillation, or you have atrial fibrillation, these chambers, instead of contracting, they're only quivering. Or that's where the word fibrillation comes from. So it's not a contraction, but it's just a series of impulses that are abnormal that makes the tissue just quiver. So you're going to have stagnation of blood. You're going to have a non-efficient way for that blood to drain into the lower chambers, and that brings a lot of problems and some of the symptoms that the patients have.
And this, you mentioned tissue a few times, so this is an abnormal tissue. Is this something that someone can be born with, or happens over time as the heart gets maybe bigger or develops a little more?
It's both actually. It could be a cause or an effect of a medical condition, and the most common form of atrial fibrillation, usually patients, over time they develop this abnormal electrical activity, and if nothing is done and is not controlled, over time the tissue of the atrium it starts enlarging, and by enlarging, like your skin forms stretch marks, right? Then the muscle of the heart starts enlarging, stretching, forming some scar tissue. The more scar tissue you have, the more abnormal electrical impulses you're going to form and develop. So it's a self-perpetuating problem that goes and gets worse over time.
Wow, that's a great definition, Dr. Galindez. Thank you so much. I don't think I've ever heard it put that way. Now, how are you treating AFib with, I guess, open and a minimally invasive surgery that you do?
As a cardiothoracic surgeon, we have certain ways at treating atrial fibrillation. There's two main groups of patients with atrial fibrillation. The patients that have the need for some other cardiac surgery to be done, either a coronary bypass, or a valve surgery, and that at the same time they have atrial fibrillation. So that's called concomitant atrial fibrillation. When the patient comes to the hospital for their surgery, then at the same time we can, because we do an open heart procedure, at the same time we can make a series of ablations or lesions in the heart to try to stop those abnormal electrical impulses. This is added to the initial surgery that the patient needs, right? Now, the second group is the patients that have atrial fibrillation but do not need any other surgery for it. So this is called standalone atrial fibrillation. And for this patient, actually, it's about 93% of the population with atrial fibrillation is standalone atrial fibrillation. So there's a lot of patients that do not need surgery, but still they have atrial fibrillation. For this kind of patients, we do, as surgeons, can help them by doing certain procedures, usually minimally invasive approaches, to get to the heart and create these lesions or ablations around the atrium to try to stop the abnormal impulses.
Wow, and we have Dr. Galindez here for another 20 minutes on Doctors Are People Too. The number is 1-888-565-1470 if you want to call in and talk to a cardiothoracic surgeon here. Now, I know there's a great video that you shared with me on tfpsheart.com / Florida Institute for Atrial Fibrillation, and that's the hybrid convergent procedure, something I hadn't heard about until a couple of years ago. Now, can you explain to the listeners a little deeper into that, how that works to treat atrial fibrillation? I believe it's for the standalone, the 93%.
You're correct, David. So the hybrid convergent procedure is, as the name implies, is a hybrid procedure because it takes two specialties to work together to have better results. And the case of the convergent procedure is an electrophysiologist, which is a cardiologist that specializes in the electrical function of the heart, and a cardiothoracic surgeon. Now, in the convergent procedure, the cardiothoracic surgeon has access to the back side of the heart, to the atrium, specifically to the left atrium. And by doing this with special instruments and special cameras, very small incision on the upper side of the abdomen to go through the diaphragm, which is the muscle that divides the thorax and the abdomen, then the surgeon can have access to the back of the heart and start doing a series of ablations. Ablations is just burns on the heart tissue, trying to form scar tissue that will quiet the abnormal impulses of atrial fibrillation. At the same time, and when the surgeon has done its part, then the electrophysiologist comes in, and with special catheters that go through the groin from the inside, from the groin to the inside of the heart, and special sensors that are able to do what it's called an electroanatomical mapping of the atrium. So what this means is that with special software in the electrophysiology lab, they're able to recreate a 3D image of that atrium, and they can see what the surgeon, in my case, what I was able to ablate and was able to successfully stop. Talking about the abnormal impulses, they can see that in the screen in a 3D configuration. Because the heart in the chest is fixed in certain positions and is fixed by what we call reflections, it is impossible to get 100% of the tissue that you wanted to ablate when you do it from the outside of the heart. And that's where the benefit of the two specialties combined together get the better results, because the electrophysiologist can see the gaps that I left intact because of anatomical constraints, and they can actually, with the catheter through the groin, through inside the heart, they can ablate and they can just connect the dots and fill the gaps to completely isolate and try to stop all the electrical impulses of atrial fibrillation.
Fascinating. Is that something that's kind of like a virgin procedure, something that's come more mainstream in the last few years? Because I hadn't heard about it until recently.
Yeah, only a few centers here in the United States are doing the procedure, because it takes the cardiac surgeon has to be trained and has to have the skill set to do the procedure. For the electrophysiologist, it's a more regular procedure, because they are used to use catheters through the groin and to work through the inside of the heart to do this kind of procedures. But by combining the benefits of the ablation from the outside of the heart, what the surgeon does, plus the benefits of what the electrophysiologists do from the inside of the heart, those two benefits are additive. So we are getting better results at controlling the kind of atrial fibrillation that many people call chronic atrial fibrillation. There's mainly three types of atrial fibrillation, according with the American Heart Association. Anything that episodes of atrial fibrillation that last less than 7 days. It could be a minute, it could be 2 minutes, it could be 1 day, 2 days, up to 7 days. It's called paroxysmal atrial fibrillation. And these patients are very well treated with either medication, and the electrophysiologists are able to use the catheters and to ablate certain parts of the heart to stop that abnormal activity. And they have pretty good results. The problem is with patients that now have these episodes for longer periods of time, right? So these patients are, this is called persistent atrial fibrillation or long-standing persistent atrial fibrillation, according to the American Heart Association. And these patients are the ones that had the atrial fibrillation longer, and it's very difficult to control those patients with a simple ablation with a catheter, because now the problem has spread throughout the tissue of the atrium. So it's very hard for the electrophysiologist to ablate the big areas with a very small catheter. That's how, by the surgeon doing the ablation on a larger area in the atrium, plus the benefits of the electrophysiologist closing the gaps that are left intact, that's how we get better results with patients with persistent atrial fibrillation and long-standing persistent atrial fibrillation, which is the chronic type of atrial fibrillation.
Closing the gaps on atrial fibrillation. And September is right around the corner, is Atrial Fibrillation Awareness Month. So we're glad to have Dr. Galindez in the studio right now. Dr. Galindez, will you tell the listeners where your offices are located?
Yes, I have privileges in Palm Beach Gardens Medical Center, the hospital, and the Ray Medical Center, and Florida Medical Center, where we do have programs for atrial fibrillation treatment. And actually, it's really important to know that it is rare to have institutions like our Tenet institutions that have all the available options and treatments for atrial fibrillation. It's not common here in the United States to have institutions that offered everything from medications to cardioversions to catheter ablations to the hybrid procedures. So we're very fortunate to have a very good team of experts about atrial fibrillation.
Perfect. So Dr. Galindez in Palm Beach Gardens at 3375 Burns Road, Suite 101. That's his office with Tenant Florida Physician Services. Numbers 561-626-6873. And now in Fort Lauderdale, 3001 Northwest 49th Avenue, Suite 104, and 954-739-2273. And also available at drneilgalindez.com to learn a little bit more about Dr. Galindez. We're going to take a quick break, and on the other side, we're going to talk about mitral valve surgery and a little bit about what Dr. Galindez does outside of performing surgery.
Hi, my name is Dr. Rahul Agarwal. I'm an interventional cardiologist in Jupiter, Florida. I did my medical school at the University of Florida and my internship and residency at the same program. I did my chief residency also at Chance, and then did my cardiology and interventional cardiology at Wake Forest University in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. I specialize in general cardiology, interventional cardiology, and nuclear cardiology. Even though I'm an interventional cardiologist, the majority of my practice involves general cardiology. General cardiology is a pretty broad spectrum in that it involves rhythm problems such as atrial fibrillation, heart disease such as coronary artery disease, congenital heart disease, high blood pressure, and cholesterol problems. I do procedures such as cardioversions, which involve trying to convert the patient back to a normal rhythm if they have an arrhythmia. I also deal with plumbing problems such as the coronary arteries, which if they're blocked, I can do angioplasty and stents, which involves balloons that open up the arteries. And these stents act as scaffolds that keep these arteries open. I really do believe in preventive medicine, and one of the areas that I really focus on is diet. One can really get caught up on the pills aspect and the exercise and diet we talk about a lot, but unless one really has some guidance as to where to go with diet, it can be quite difficult. So I do give my patients homework in terms of books or movies that they can rent or obtain so that they can get educated. Our cardiology office is located in the Abacoa area of Jupiter, Florida, conveniently located between two of the local hospitals. We provide echocardiography, stress testing, ultra monitoring, and general cardiology office visits. We really pride our practice in its staff, who are very courteous and professional. We believe that under our care, you'll feel the same way too.
You are listening to Doctors Are People Too with David DiPino, who shows us the human side of medical doctors in the community. If you have a question for our guest, call into the show at 888-565-1470. Now, let's get back to the fun side of doctors and show that they are people too.
Perfect. Correct. All right, we're back on the air with Doctors Are People Too. We have Dr. Neil Galindez here. We're going to get right back into atrial fibrillation because September is Atrial Fibrillation Awareness Month. Why is it important to treat atrial fibrillation? It's a flutter in the heart, or arrhythmia. It's something that flutters. I mean, you can explain it better, but why is it important to treat it? What could happen if we don't?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, when you have atrial fibrillation, you have a uncontrolled and uncoordinated way of pumping blood through the heart. And when your atrium, instead of contracting in unison with the ventricles, start fibrillating, then you're going to have some stagnation of blood in certain areas of the atrium. We know that there is a small cavity, small pouch in the left side of the heart, on the left atrium, called the left atrial appendage. And we also know that in patients with atrial fibrillation that have strokes because of atrial fibrillation, 90% of the time, the clots that cause the strokes are formed on that small pouch. So as a patient with atrial fibrillation, you are 5 times more prone to have a stroke just because you have atrial fibrillation. And that's why patients are on anticoagulation, to try to thin their blood to prevent the disastrous event of a stroke. Also, it has to do with quality of life. When a patient has an episode of atrial fibrillation with what we called a rapid ventricular response. And this is a lot of those abnormal impulses are passing through into the lower chambers of the heart, into the ventricles. And the ventricles, when they see this electrical activity, they're going to contract. And your heart rate can go from normal from the 60s to the and 80s to the 200s, to the 250s. Just imagine a heart rate of 250 beats per minute, right? So the patients feel terrible. They feel short of breath. They feel dizzy. They feel chest palpitations, chest stumping or fluttering, and they can just not work. If you're at work, you have to stop doing what you're doing. They could be just at home, and they have to stop taking care of your kids, being with your wife, being with your family members, and it's very debilitating, and your quality of life is disrupted severely. So, why treat atrial? Going back to your question, why treat atrial fibrillation? By treating atrial fibrillation and trying to get patients into a more normal rhythm, and getting rid of all the symptoms, you do two things. One, you can lower the risk of the patients having a stroke, and second, you improve their quality of life. And every single patient is, in my opinion, that is treated for atrial fibrillation, we have to take care of this left atrial appendage. As I said, 90% of the clots come from that place in patients of atrial fibrillation. And there's minimal invasive ways to get rid of this appendage, either by video assisted thoracic surgery, which is also a minimally invasive approach that uses a small camera and small incisions through the chest to get to the part of the heart that has the pouch, and just put a special clip in the pouch. The second option is just by doing it through the groin. And we have a program where Dr. Bridge Manny, which is our interventionalist cardiologist and expert in this area, does what it's called the Watchman device. And this is a plug that is actually, you can put this plug into that pouch to prevent clots that have formed or the risk of forming clots and these clots getting into the circulation through a catheter through the groin. So there's many options. There are minimal invasive approaches, and we do have the option of going to any of our institutions to do it.
Well, and I was lucky enough to watch a live Watchman device being put in my my healthcare PR job. So you kind of touched on a little bit of a question I was going to ask a little later, but that's fine because we're moving right along. Now, if you or someone has a heart rate that's out of control, contact your physician. There's many things that Dr. Galindez has shared with us that can, give you better quality of life. But one of the things I want to share with the listeners, we only have a few more minutes, so is the LVAD procedure. And that's for, the way I read about it was someone maybe who didn't have a chance, maybe was going to be sent to maybe hospice. I mean, kind of, that kind of care on the way out. Now there's a new procedure. I believe the first in Palm Beach County to do it was Delray Medical Center, and it's called LVAD. Explain that, and I think you have a story. Maybe you did one recently?
That's correct, David. And you're right. The LVAD stands for Left Ventricular Assist Device. And this is a special type of hardware. It's a pump. It's a pump that takes over the heart's function. In patients with advanced heart failure, where their function is so diminished that they cannot take 2 or 3 steps before getting short of breath, before getting very fatigued, dizzy. On all these patients that have no other options because they have gone through a series of medical treatments, with medicines. With medicines, and sometimes patients get pacemakers to try to get their function back. But after a while, and after many years, if all these therapies do not work, then they only have 2 options. This is patients that are candidates for transplantation. I'm talking about heart transplantation. Then they can go ahead, get listed, and get their heart transplanted. The problem with this option is that over the last, I would say since the 1990s here in the United States, the number of transplanted hearts have been kind of stagnant. We're about 2,500 transplantations a year, and we're not getting any better. At the same time, the population is aging, and although we're getting better at treating other heart conditions, the populations with heart failure keeps going up and keeps increasing. So there's a mismatch for hearts that are available for transplantation and the amount of patients that actually need a transplantation, right? So now we have an option for all these patients with end-stage heart failure to implant this special kind of pump that takes over the function of the heart to reestablish flow on their bodies, to reestablish good flow that before they didn't have. And we know that 80% of patients who are recipients of these special pumps at 6 months and thereafter, their symptoms go back to where they were before many, many years ago. There's 4 categories of symptoms of heart failure according to the American Heart Association. And the stage 4 is the worst. Stage 1 is the beginning. So you get 80% of patients with stage 3 and stage 4 heart failure symptoms back to stage 1 and stage 2 at 6 months, improving their quality of life dramatically. We have patients in our program at the Ray Medical Center that have gone to trips and cruises, and they go on with their lives, while before they would not be able to even take 2-3 steps to the restroom without getting short of breath. And as a matter of fact, we just did an implant of an LVAD this morning at the Ray Medical Center.
Wow, just this morning. And I can tell you about that patient because he's in the news. It's Arthur Ruffino. He had the first one done in Palm Beach County, and he just did take a cruise halfway around the world, and it's documented. You can see Arthur's story at tfpsheart.com. Dr. Glendez, we have just enough time for a couple more. I want you to have a chance to talk about your team at the Tenet Florida Heart and Vascular Network. I think you mentioned Dr. Bridge Manny before. Talk about who else you're working at with a couple of the other hospitals.
Yeah, I have the fortune to work with very talented doctors, and one of them are on the direction of Dr. Brian Bethea, which is the medical director of the surgery of the cardiac surgery program here in South Florida. Dr. Eric Bayer, down south in Florida Medical Center, also very experienced cardiothoracic surgeon, and specializes also on atrial fibrillation, hybrid ablations in general cardiac surgery. Electrophysiologists that I work with, Dr. David Weissman down in Palm Beach Gardens Medical Center, and Dr. Matthew Klein. We treat a lot of patients with atrial fibrillation, and we do the convergent procedure together.
And those are the cardiac electrophysiologists. We actually had Dr. Wiseman call in a couple weeks ago, and he explained how he's an electrician of the heart. And that was kind of the way he kind of explained as we started in the beginning. So great team at Tenet Florida Physician Services, part of the Tenet Florida Heart and Vascular Network. And again, you can find any of the physicians, their info at tfpsheart.com. Dr. Glendez, where did you go to medical school residency and fellowship for education and training?
I attended medical school in Houston, Texas.
Okay.
And University of Texas at Houston. I did my general surgery residency, 5 years of residency in New Jersey in Morristown Memorial Hospital. And then I went back to the UT system in Texas, UT Southwestern in Dallas, Texas, to complete 3 years of cardiothoracic surgery.
Nice. And lastly, we talked about a lot today, but what do you do outside of surgery? What are your passions in life?
Well, as you said before, sometimes it gets really busy, but when I have time free time, I try really hard to spend quality time with my family, with my 3 daughters and my wife. We like to spend time together, go travel locally. We like to go to the movies. I like photography. So I'm very passionate about photography, and whenever I have a little time, I'll grab my camera and take it with us in our trips, and that's what I do.
Nice. Well, thanks so much for coming on Doctors Are People Too. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, David. Thank you for having me.
And that's Dr. Neil Galindez. He's got an office in Palm Beach Gardens and Fort Lauderdale. He's on staff at Delray Medical Center, Palm Beach Gardens Medical Center, and Florida Medical Center, a campus in North Shore and Fort Lauderdale. And you can find him at www.drneilgalindez.com or 561-626-6873. Thank you for listening on Doctors Are People Too. We'll be back.
I make a dinner for me and my girlfriend. We ate, we enjoyed the dinner. It was very good. She was ready to go to sleep. I said, okay, I'm gonna stay on the couch a little bit to watch TV. I started to feel something in my throat, like I was choking, and all this other, I feel the pain, the sharp pain, like somebody put a knife in your back and open and do like this. That was when I called my girlfriend. I said, you have to take me to the hospital. I couldn't die. When they were doing the test, they saw something was weird. My valve was ripped. I said, God, please help me to get out of this. Dr. Valle was on call. He was who performed my surgery. I describe like an angel. I describe like he was there to do that for me. My girlfriend, my son, he told me when they saw him getting out from the operation room, he was sweating. He was tired to be there for 10 hours. For me, it's unbelievable. I can walk, I can exercise a little bit, and I can drink red wine, that light red wine. Of course, 1 glass or 2 glasses. I see the life different. And I want to see my granddaughter to grow and my son to get old. So I wanna live. I think that God gave me one more chance in life, and I had to take advantage of this.
You are listening to Doctors Are People Too with David DiPino, who shows us the human side of medical doctors in the community. If you have a question for our guest, call into the show at 888-565-1470. Now, let's get back to the fun side of doctors and show that they are people too.
You said that. Hi, we're back on Doctors Are People Too, and we're on the iHeartRadio app globally. And I'm so happy to have in the studio Dr. Craig Spodak. He's an expert dentist from the Spodak Dental Group. He's a pillar in the Delray Beach community in Palm Beach County. I knew him from my days as a reporter with the Sun Sentinel, and one of my goals when I wanted to start this show was to have Dr. Spodak on, and really an honor to have him on here today. I think he is my first dentist on the show, but you're going to tell me exactly what you are, because I know you're not just a dentist. Dr. Spodak, how are you?
I'm great, David. Thank you so much, man. Those words mean a lot to me. I appreciate that.
And thanks for coming along, and so we can tell people about, the adventure of health in a way. We like to do it in a fun way. So let's get right into it. I know you have a very important day coming up. I first heard about it, I think, a couple years ago. There was an article, but it's Freedom Day, and it's where you kind of give back to the men and women and their families who, protect our freedoms. So if you could talk a little bit about that, and if you have the info when the date is.
Yeah, absolutely. So Freedom Day USA is a national network of affiliated businesses. It's not just for doctors and dentists. It's also a network of affiliated businesses and restaurants and things like that. And what it is a way for us as civilians to give back to the men and women who are doing so much in service to our country, and also to their families. So as a veteran of the military, you may have access to medical and dental care, but your family sometimes won't. And this is a day of national charity where we get together and give back. So we did it last year. This is going to be our third year. It's actually on September 8th. A friend of mine, Dr. Bob Martino, started it. He's in West Virginia. and it's grown quite rapidly. It's just a wonderful way to give back to those people who give so much to us. So it's really touching. Last year we had a guy who had his legs blown off, unfortunately, in Fallujah, in Iraq. And he was at the time working as a private defense contract for the military, so he wasn't covered. And he had no dental care and no prosthetic legs. And we were instrumental in getting both that to him.
And that's huge for a boost of confidence because, we, as human beings, we want to smile, we want to share emotions and everything. So giving someone a smile can really help out.
Yeah, well, a smile is a form of expression. Everybody smiles the same in every language. Doesn't matter what corner of the planet you go to. When you flash your smile and it's nice and you're proud of it, it means something. It's a form of communication. So we never underestimate the power of a smile.
Nice, very important. And that's September 8th, so that's coming right up. And,
yes, sir.
They can go to spodakdental.com. I think there's some info there. Is that
Absolutely.
the best way?
Yes, there is. Or on our Facebook page, Facebook.com/Spodak Dental. It's probably a little bit more live way of keeping up with our events.
And I know everyone knows you in Delray, but Spodak is Spodak, and it's Dr. Craig Spodak. So put in the browser Spodak Dental, and it'll come up. And we're going to talk about the website in a second. But I've been to your offices. I was actually there when you opened them years ago. I think like 2007-ish, 2008. Am I right?
The new office was 2013, late in 2013.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm a little off there.
Yeah, time flies when you're having fun, right?
Definitely. Now, that's one of the most appealing offices I've ever visited. That's what I was trying to get. And kind of give us a little audio tour of your office with the team, your doctors. I saw on the website today combined 199 years experience. Couldn't get to 200 years, huh?
Well, the website was done over a year ago. So, David, I think we met your goal. So my father started the practice back in Delray Beach in 1976. And it was just him as a solo doctor and a solo dentist, rather, and my mother. And I joined him in 1998 after graduating from Tufts University and worked for my dad from 1998 to 2006. And then in 2006, I took over the ownership of the practice because what I felt is that patients don't want to have to go to a myriad of different doctors and specialists to get things done. So what we did under our roof is we just brought everybody under one roof. I had an experience at the Cleveland Clinic, and I met with 3 or 4 doctors at one appointment. I said, this is the way of the future. This is what I want to have. So we started off by pulling all the different specialists under one roof, and then we built our own dental lab. And now, actually, today we have machinery, 3D printers, actually 3D milling machines that can actually make dental crowns and veneers in 20 minutes, 30 minutes. So you don't have to go home with the temporary. So our office was really born out of that idea that technology and convenience are going to be very important factors for patients. So we built a 13,000 square foot LEED Gold certified building. For those of you in the audience that don't know what LEED is, it's Leadership in Environmental Engineering Design. So we built an environmentally friendly facility. In fact, it's not only environmentally friendly, it's a biophilic facility. So it means it has tons of daylight, natural plants, and things like that. 85% of our space is daylit. And that's a big deal in medicine because, access to daylight and nature reduces medical errors and decreases healing time. So it's a really nice thing to have for our building. But it was designed by a very famous architect, Michael Singer. He also did the Palm Beach waterfront rehabilitation and the theater there in downtown West Palm Beach.
Awesome.
He also did a Terminal C at the Denver airport, and a garden at the Greek embassy, U.S. embassy rather, in Greece. So he's a real famous guy, and I was really proud to be able to work alongside him.
And I'm jotting that down, and like I said, I've been there. I know you're very big on water efficiency and conservation, light, transparency, and energy. And when I went on your website, the first thing I started reading about is when the rain falls and how you recycle the water that comes off the building and it's reused right there in the area. It's amazing, like 200,000 gallons or something.
Yes, there's 2 things. We have an underwater lake under our parking lot. It's 208,000 gallon retention pond. So instead of the water just running off into the sewer system, it goes down below the parking lot and percolates into like the natural aquifer. So it's a storage area. And then we have another water capture device, which are 2 14,000-gallon cisterns. So those cisterns capture rainwater off our roof, and we use it for non-potable uses like irrigation and stuff like that. So the building is 13,000 square feet, but it actually performs better than our old office, which was like 4,000 square feet. So the electric bill is actually lower in that. It's incredible. And also it feels good to know that you did something good for the environment. Maybe you set some examples for other people to take lead on.
I think down the road you're going to be one of those guys or businesses that FP&L pays back that I've heard about.
That'd be nice. No time soon. I just saw my electric bill with the heat we've been having.
Yeah, but imagine if you didn't, where if
we don't have solar yet, though.
Yeah.
At the time, solar wasn't a really good use of money. It's better to have LED lighting and things like that. So
I don't want to get too much in it, but I'm a native Floridian, and we're a little behind on the solar thing. And you've got a cistern on your roof, and that's very smart. We should be, saving our rainwater and using it. But that's a story for another day. Yeah. Let's where I was on your website, fascinating website, one of the best I've ever seen. How can people get in touch with you? Obviously, there's Spodak Dental, but your phone number as well. Let's give that out.
Sure, of course. Spodak Dental is the easiest place. Or just Google my last name, Spodak, Spodak, or our phone number, 561-498-0050 or 1-888-SPODAK-NOW, NOW.
And you may see the Spodak Mini driving around town. You still got that?
You got to be in downtown Delray to see that one. But yeah,
we're in Boca today, but that's all right. We broadcast in Delray, and we're live here on Doctors Are People too. The number's 1-888-565-1470. If you want to ask a quick question to Dr. Spodak, I mean, give you a little information, but if you're looking for something more, you may have to go see him in person, but it's worth the trip. We just talked about the building. Let's get back into about the on-site services. So, I'm a dental patient, not with you yet, but probably in the future. After hearing all this, I needed a crown, and what my process was, I had like a casting done, and then was sent off to, I believe, California. But you're doing the actual crown on site?
Yeah. So for the last 7 years, we've had a dental lab, but only the last 3 of those, we've actually had those 3D printers. So you may be familiar with an athlete, Giancarlo Stanton.
Oh, yeah.
He's making a lot of news
Marlins
these days.
Are my team.
Yeah, so mine too. So anyway, Giancarlo had the unfortunate incident of getting hit with a baseball, 100-mile-an-hour baseball, breaking his teeth. And through contacts, because I'm pretty well-known in my industry and I lecture a lot, they sent him to me. So he had a temporary that was put in the hospital, and in one day, in literally an hour and a half, I made him permanent teeth because he's a busy guy. So getting back to the technology, we have the capability to, if you broke your front tooth, you need a dental crown, you don't have to go home with a temper any longer. You can just literally have the crown milled right there. It's prettier, it's better, it's less expensive, and it's faster.
Let me just get this right, though. It can be done the same day?
20 minutes, yes. So it's an optical scan of your teeth. No more goopy impressions. We don't take those goopy impressions in my office. And a 6-axis milling machine literally sculpts a block of porcelain, and it's perfect. It's really perfect. Like if I had to have a dental crown, or when I do, because I'm sure my teeth will eventually break down, that's what I want in my mouth. It's fun. It's really wonderful.
Unbelievable. I'm going to throw a baseball term in here. I mean, you are ahead of the curve. Big time here.
I didn't know that was a baseball term.
Well, Stan, he had a hard time hitting the curve for a little years, but he's back. And
he's doing great.
They're making a playoff run.
And it's interesting. I don't want to hijack the topics, but Giancarlo Stanton and I have partnered on a charity as well. I don't know if we're going to be getting to that, but that's pretty interesting.
Well, let's go into it now because we're talking about Stanton anyways.
So when he came in back in September, that was September of 15. September of 15. We took care of him, and was it September of 15 or I'm getting confused here. September of 14. I'm sorry. Okay. September of 14. So we met, and he liked what we were doing. He saw the charitable stuff we're doing, and he said, I'd love to do something charitable with you as well. And part of his contract with the Marlins, which I'm sure everybody knows about, is a pretty record-breaking contract. He has to donate a certain portion of that money towards a charity, and he wanted to do it with us. So it's really unbelievably honored to partner with a guy like that. So we started our own charity. It's just filing for 501c3 status this week. It's called All Star Smiles, and last year we helped almost 100 children, gave $63,000 in free dental care to the children of Lenore B. Smith Elementary School in Liberty City, Miami, in partnership with the Marlins. So we went down in this area in Liberty City, and it was really just a really impoverished area. I think 60 to 80% of the parents don't have cars. So you know that the kids could have access to care if they could physically get there, but they can't. So the Marlins brought up 5 buses with their AUDON, their community outreach portion of their outfit, and they brought all the kids up. We did tons of work. It was wonderful. And unlike other charities where you donate $1 and you're lucky if 60 or 80 cents gets to the bottom line, I think John Carlo's contribution was about $30,000, and we did $60,000 of work. So it's really efficient, and we're excited to do it again this year. That's going to be October 30th at my office, if the Marlins don't make the playoffs. If they make the playoffs, we have to have a second date.
Well, let's hope you get a second date.
Yeah,
So
let's
I'm a
hope
Marlins
so.
fan since day one. So
Yeah.
is that your team, the Marlins?
You know what's funny is I'm not a sports fan, so I've had Allen Iverson as
I
a
was just
patient.
gonna get to that. Yeah, I
I've
saw
had
the
John
picture.
Carlos Stanton, and it's so funny. Trey Mason recently, and the funny thing is they come in, and I'm like, I'm really sorry. I know you're a big deal, and I want to be respectful, but I don't follow it. So like John Carlo and I will sometimes have to text about things. I'm like, I don't know, are you in like the World Series right now? I don't want to disturb you. But these are wonderful human beings. And John Carlos, forget his athletic prowess, forget who he is as an athlete. He is an absolutely amazing human being. I mean, he's there for those children. His legacy is going to be really profound beyond just baseball.
That's great to hear. And let me tell you, his smile looks better than before.
Yeah.
I mean, I saw it on your website. I watch him all the games, and
Yeah.
you did a great job. And that's
Thank
got to
you.
be huge to him, because confidence, even with a pro athlete, he had some confidence issues at first after getting hit in the face.
Yeah, I think he's wearing that specialized face mask now. We're actually in the process of designing athletic mouth guard for him. It's pretty cool. So you might see him up at the plate
Awesome.
with a mouth guard.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, that's great that we tackled that. And I was going to ask you about Allen Iverson. I saw him on your Facebook page, and I will just briefly, Allen Iverson is the fastest athlete I've ever seen in person in a game. I saw him play against the Orlando Magic back in the day when he was a Sixer in a playoff game, and unbelievable. He took over the game with his speed. But let's get back into dental medicine. Now, in the past, I know you've done training for other dentists, and let's talk a little bit about that, because that's something that you don't hear every day, where you're bringing, I think, one of the only in the Southeast to do a certain type of training.
Yeah, I'm the president of a dental organization called the Progressive Dentist Network. So it's a national affiliated group of dentists that learn from each other. But we get dentists all the time. As a matter of fact, I was taking a call before, just walking in here. There's a dentist from Wichita, Kansas that's flying in his team to just see us and learn from us. So my goal when I built the building is I wanted to inspire dentists. I wanted to inspire people. And I wanted to kind of change the game of dentistry, and that's what we're doing. We're bringing other people in, training them on a whole bunch of different techniques. We're 9 doctors total, and like you said, 200 years of experience. So between all of us, we have a lot to teach and even a lot to learn from it. When we bring other dentists into our facility for a couple days, it's invariable that we all learn from each other, and that's the goal for something like what we're doing. I just want to keep learning.
That's awesome. I think that's one of the coolest things about medicine, whether it's dentistry or we had a cardiothoracic surgeon in here talking about his team, is how the way, you share with in different regions. Like you mentioned Wichita, Kansas, there's an expert that calls another expert, and that combination, I really think it really helps with care in the 21st century.
And I think that's a problem with dentistry too, is dentistry is a very solo profession. I mean, the hospitals, like the doctor you had here before, he gets to interact in an academic setting with other doctors in the hospital, and that's really good. Studies show that peer pressure and assimilation with other doctors is good. It's good for care, it's good for patients, it's good for learning. But 78% of dentists practice solo or alone. So they park themselves in their shopping centers, and if they don't take much continuing education, they don't really evolve. So a model where you're multi-doctor is really powerful. Like our doctors, we get together 7 to 10 times per year and just present cases that are difficult. We are constantly learning from each other. I learn from the younger guys in my office because they just approach things differently. And I think one of the most amazing parts about having a profession like mine is continuing to grow and learn. It's really rewarding.
And we're here with Dr. Craig Spodak. Will you give out the 188 number again? I missed the end. 188 Spodak.
Yeah, it's 1888 Spodak now, N-O-W.
N-O-W. I wrote mini because I was talking about the mini. Yeah. So 1888 Spodak now.
Yeah.
And then also spodakdental.com. And where are you located on Atlantic Avenue?
We're at 3911 West Atlantic Avenue, which is about a mile west of I-95 on the north-hand side of the street.
Okay, so just a little bit west of I-95 in downtown Delray Beach. We talked briefly about the training that you do, the experience. We're going to go a little bit more on the experience in a second, and the family dentistry experience. But I want to talk about your areas, what I call areas of interest, but, the preventative dental care, periodontal gum care. Let's start with with a couple of these. Why is preventive dental care so important? It sounds like obvious, but why?
Well, as we all know, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And the best dentistry is no dentistry. I'm a third-generation dentist, and proud to say I don't yet have any dental work in my mouth. And dentistry is something that, obviously you break a tooth and something happens, you have to get it. But if you can avoid having restorative dentistry, if you can avoid having your teeth touched by a dentist, that's always best. The way to do that is with prevention. So daily flossing, I know that study just came out, but I promise you it's a selective study, and it's good to floss your teeth. It takes 2 minutes a day. It's actually been proven to increase your life expectancy because of gum disease being such a killer beyond just the mouth. But regular cleanings, checkups, oral cancer is a huge killer in the United States. And a dentist, when you have your periodic exams, will routinely check your mouth for oral cancer. It's really important. Prevention is the key. And I highly recommend to the audience to see your dentist at least once or twice per year for cleanings and exams.
And you mentioned oral cancer, so you can see tongue cancer as well?
Yeah, so the reason why oral cancer is so deadly, it's difficult to spot. Obviously, if you have something growing on your nose and it's bleeding or looking kind of funky, you're going to see that dermatologist fairly quickly. If it's on the lateral or side border of your tongue in the back of your mouth, you're not going to detect it. When you go to the dentist, if you notice, they kind of sometimes they should at least be taking your tongue and pulling it to the side and checking the sides of your tongue. And it's part of an oral cancer exam. And it's recommended by the ADA. That's completed once per year. Very important. We detect a lot of oral cancer. We've detected, I think, 3 oral cancer lesions in the last month. But also we have an oral maxillofacial surgeon as part of our team. So when we see something suspicious, we can just literally call him in and he'll take a look at you right in the room.
And I want to get to a couple other things, so I'm just going to read these out, and people can go to spodakdental.com to learn more about it. So periodontal gum care, Invisalign.
Yeah, big deal with Invisalign. We're number, I think, 6 in the world, 6th highest producer of Invisalign in the world.
Ceramic crowns and porcelain veneers. Wisdom teeth, which a lot of us have had.
Yep.
Bonding, root canal therapy, dental implants, cracked filling or tooth, TMJ and jaw problems. That's something I've heard a lot about.
Yep. And the good thing, David, is all that's done by specialists. So a root canal, some of your audience may say like, "Oh, I'm not having that; it doesn't work." But statistically speaking, if an endodontist, a root canal specialist, does a root canal, the chance of it surviving in your mouth more than 10 years is up at 98%. If a general dentist does it because he took a weekend course or he's doing root canal, that statistic is half. So it's really important that you pursue specialists for dentistry. It's very important. You wouldn't go to your family doctor to deliver your baby anymore, even though that might have been common 70, 80 years ago. It's just like medicine is specialized. I believe that the future for dentistry is specialization as well.
It sounds like medicine obviously has evolved. We know that, in dentistry as well. Also, dental implants. I did say that before. I'm sorry. Power whitening, complete cosmetic and reconstructive smile enhancement. Sleep dentistry, which is the IV sedation. That's important. And I saw on your site sleep apnea.
Yeah. Lots of sleep apnea. So
really?
Dentist. Yeah. So if you're not happy with your CPAP, the Darth Vader mask, and you can't sleep with it, we can make an oral appliance that'll help you sleep better and fix more moderate cases of sleep apnea. If you're severe, if your numbers are 15 to 20, that's not going to work for you. But if you have moderate sleep apnea, moderate or mild sleep apnea, the oral appliances work if you can't sleep with the mask on.
That's great to hear.
It's good stuff.
Boy, I got to get over there. It's one stop for everything at spodakdental.com. Now, I saw on the website new patient form, so you are accepting new patients, and something that we can fill in and then bring it in, and we can. You have a staff that can check insurances, etc. That's a big question.
Yeah, so we're a provider for just about all the big PPOs, like the top 20, all the ones you'd hear about: Aetna, Guardian, MetLife, Delta, all the ones that you'd know about. Every once in a while, I hear one I've never heard of, and obviously, we're not like Joe's PPO.
Yeah.
but all the
big
other ones.
Though.
Yeah, the big ones, yeah.
Now, briefly talk about your staff. I know you have a huge staff. How many work for you? And
so now we're at 52 people and 9 doctors. And we just, if there's something that's good for the patient, if there's a technology or service that's going to help the delivery of care, make the experience better, we're really all about it. I'm proud of my team. We got Best Workplace of the Year by the Sun Sentinel, or top 10 best workplaces for small businesses. We're very charitable. We have a charity matching program. If any employee donates to any 501c3 of their choice, we match them dollar for dollar, up to $500, and just a great team. I'd say the thing I'm most proud of is my ability to select good people. I'm surrounded by amazing people.
And they look like great people too. And I saw the photos on the website. We only have 2 more minutes, but I'm going to have you on in the future because I could go up forever with you.
Okay, great. I talk fast too. I'm sorry.
No, you're great. We like that. In the last 2 minutes, let's talk a little bit about 3 generations of family dentistry. I just got to tell you, I love the timeline on the website. I really was fun with that. Talk about the 3 generations next 2 minutes and what brought you to Delray. I think you came at an early age.
Yes. So my dad moved here. Well, first of all, I am a 3rd generation. So my grandfather, Harry Spodak, practiced in Brooklyn, New York. We actually have many patients that have seen him. So you can't be related to that guy. I'm like, oh, no, that was my grandfather. So
unbelievable.
Grandpa Harry practiced there, Harry Spodak. He graduated dental school, I think, in 1927.
Wow.
Yeah, so he was a dentist back in Brooklyn on Flatbush and Argyle. I've never been there. And then Dad became a dentist in 1966 and then decided to move down to Delray Beach, Florida in 1976. I joined him in 1998, and he came to Delray because my uncle was here and looked like a good place to go, and he had a good gut instinct. It's a good decision on his part.
Nice.
Love Delray.
That is great. And it's 1-888-SPODAC now, and it's spodacdental.com. Dr. Craig Spodak, thank you so much for coming on Doctors Are People
David.
Too.
This has been real fun. I appreciate you.
And I appreciate it, and we're going to have you on again in the future.
Cool.
So we'll talk to you next week on Doctors Are People Too.
Thank you for listening and watching Doctors Are People Too with David DiPino. Join us next week for more in-depth views on what doctors are all about and how they spend their free time. All shows can be seen on amp2.tv. And if you have questions you want answered on the air, call 866-224-5422 and leave a message that can be read on the air. The opinions expressed on the preceding sponsored program were strictly those of its hosts, guests, and callers, and not necessarily those of the station.